This happened last month. I'm 26 years old and I live in Atlanta. I picked up a side job as an Uber driver. I worked mornings at a garage and drove for Uber at night. I preferred the night shift. Less traffic. Anyway, one evening I was finishing a ride near the mall around 8 p.m. It was a long summer night. I decided I'd take one last ride and then head home to enjoy my weekend. I waited near the mall for another request, but after 10-15 minutes, nothing came through. Disappointed, I decided to call it a night. I lived in a small cabin on the outskirts of town. I got on the highway and headed home. I turned on some music and rolled down the window. A cool breeze rushed in. It felt good. I lit a cigarette and kept driving, relaxed. I couldn't wait to get home and sleep until noon the next day. Everything was fine until I reached the highway tunnel. The EMR highway has a massive tunnel that connects the city to the suburbs. I was almost at the entrance. Since the roads were completely empty, I was driving a little fast. I was maybe 30 or 40 feet from the tunnel when a man suddenly stepped out right in front of my car. I slammed on the brakes so hard the tires screeched and the car jolted to a stop. My heart nearly stopped. I thought I might have hit him. I looked around frantically, but he was gone. Then, suddenly, a hand grabbed my shoulder through the open window. I nearly jumped out of my skin, but I forced myself to look. It was a man in his 30s, breathing hard, gasping for air. "Help me, please," he said in a trembling voice. I immediately thought he was in danger. "What's going on? Why are you freaking out?" He kept glancing around like someone was hunting him. "He's looking for me," he whispered. "Please help me." I stepped out of the car and looked around. Honestly, there was no one. The empty highway echoed with crickets. I peered into the tunnel. The long stretch was lit only by dim yellow lights. "Who's looking for you?" I asked. He answered in a chilling voice. "The shadow people. They want me dead." I had no idea what he was talking about. "Is this some kind of joke?" I said, because I'm really not in the mood. Suddenly, the man jumped into the driver's seat and shouted, "Drive! We have to get out of here now." "They're coming." I got back in, confused. "Let me call 911. My house is just past the tunnel. You can wait in my car until they get there." That's when he pulled a knife from his pocket and held it near my throat. "Drive," he screamed. "You're not scared of death if you don't drive right now." Before he finished the sentence, he looked into the back seat and froze. He stared into nothing like a statue. "What's wrong with you? Shadow people aren't real. Stop this and let me call 911. "Oh my God," he whispered. "He's watching us. Right there." I turned around to see what he was staring at. I was sure it was just his imagination, but when I looked, my heart dropped into my stomach. I swear to you, there was a group of dark figures standing on the road behind us. You couldn't see faces, no features, just pure black shapes where their bodies should be. "Now you believe me?" the man said. "Drive, drive." "What is that?" I shouted. "Who are they? Why do they look like that? They're all dead, and now they want my soul." The group began moving towards the car. I can't even describe the horror. There were maybe 10 or 12 of them, but there was no sound, no footsteps. It looked like they were gliding across the pavement instead of walking. I tried to start the engine, but it wouldn't turn over. I tried again and again. Nothing. I couldn't believe the car had suddenly died like that. "They're coming," the man yelled. "Do something." I slammed the key one last time. The engine roared to life. I slammed the gas and we shot forward into the tunnel at full speed. I glanced in the rearview mirror. No one was there. I decided I'd get home and call 911 to turn this lunatic in. I was almost at the end of the tunnel when black shapes suddenly appeared in the air ahead of us, blocking the exit. I slammed on the brakes and stopped just feet away from them. This time, I kept the engine running. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. No faces, no color, just black silhouettes standing silently in front of the car. The man beside me started screaming, then sobbing like a child. What happened next still gives me chills. The entire group suddenly opened their eyes at the same time. They were still pitch black, except now dozens of glowing eyes were staring straight at us. Their eyes were enormous and wide open, blood red, with pale white pupils. I have never seen anything so terrifying in my life. They all turned their gaze toward the man beside me, letting out low, disturbing growls. For a second, it felt like we were being hunted by a pack of wolves. I snapped out of my paralysis and slammed my foot on the gas. The car shot straight through the group of black shadows. We passed through them like they were nothing but air. As we exited the tunnel, I finally saw flashing red and blue lights on the other side. 3 or 4 police cars were parked there. I hadn't even called 911, but at that point, I was completely disconnected from reality. I was exhausted, drained. The man in the car was still sobbing, whispering, "Please, let me go. Leave me alone." I know what I experienced that night sounds made up, but if you believe me, there might be a rational explanation for what happened. The police arrived and arrested the man. They told me he was serving a life sentence for a mass murder at a cathedral. He had escaped just hours earlier, and his mental state was deeply unstable. They took him back into custody. Later, I read more about him. His name was Peter Shipman. One Sunday morning, he walked into a church with 2 accomplices. After the prayer ended, the accomplices locked the doors from the inside. They shot 7 men and 5 women who had come to worship. Then they robbed them and fled. One of the accomplices crashed their getaway car into a tree while escaping and died on impact. Shipman and the other man ran. Police later arrested Shipman under a bridge. He kept muttering, "The shadows killed my partners." The second accomplice's body was later found in the river nearby. Investigators believed Shipman killed him to keep all the money, but part of me still wonders, what if it was the spirits of the victims taking revenge? Shadows are terrifying, but sometimes the real monster is the person sitting right next to you. If your heart's still racing, smash that like button and subscribe to stay safe in the dark. Ready for a ride that'll leave you breathless? Let's talk about Riley. Riley left her friend's house late that night. She stumbled along the sidewalk. She'd been at a party and was completely drunk. A streetlight cast a dim glow over the empty road. There was no one around. Her house was still 30 minutes away. She stopped under a lamppost and decided to book an Uber to get home safely. With blurry vision and unfocused eyes, she ordered the ride. The car number listed in the app was 2009. Riley waited a few minutes, glancing around nervously. The wind and the silence of the night made her uneasy. I should have listened to Casey. It was a bad idea to stay out tonight. Anxious thoughts ran through her mind until headlights appeared at the end of the road. A white Uber approached. Riley waved, and the car stopped in front of her. She was so drunk the headlights made everything even blurrier. She glanced at the number on the vehicle. "Oh yeah, that's it," she mumbled. The driver looked at her in the rear-view mirror. "Where to?" 21 IMR Street. "And please drive faster." The driver gave her a strange smile. "As you wish." Riley closed her eyes for a few minutes, trying to steady herself. She started to feel slightly better when she opened her eyes again. They were no longer on the highway. The car was driving down an old, dusty road. She straightened up. "Hey, what road is this?" The driver smiled again. "Just a shortcut, ma'am. Don't worry." Riley checked the GPS. There was a connecting road further ahead. The driver kept talking. "So, you live alone, huh?" "Yes," Riley answered, trying to keep the conversation brief. The driver seemed like he was flirting with her. Then he said something that sent a chill down her spine. "You know, a pretty girl like you shouldn't be out alone at night. Haven't you heard what's been going on lately?" Suddenly, Riley remembered what her friend Sarah had said earlier at the party. They had all been sitting on the couch drinking when Sarah said, "Have you guys heard about the throat slasher?" Everyone had gone quiet. Sarah explained that over the past few days, Atlanta police had found 3 bodies along highways. It looked like someone had cut their throats and dumped them in roadside bushes. Police didn't know who was responsible, but they suspected a serial killer was roaming at night, luring people into traps before killing them. All 3 bodies had been found on deserted roads, suggesting there were no witnesses. Riley tensed up instantly. Then, her phone buzzed with a notification from the Uber app. She hadn't closed the app after getting into the car. The notification read, "You have been charged for a cancelled ride." Riley opened the app and felt her blood run cold. The car numbered 2009 had been waiting for her. She was not in it. The real Uber, the one with the number 2009, had been waiting at the pickup point for nearly 15 minutes. When she didn't show up, the driver cancelled the ride and left. If her ride had been cancelled, then who was driving her now? Riley's stomach twisted with fear. She couldn't speak, couldn't scream. There was no one around. Anyway, she couldn't call anyone with this man sitting right there. She knew he had lured her with bad intention. Was this the so-called throat slasher everyone had talked about at the party? Oh God. Sweat formed on her forehead. She forced herself to calm down. The only way she was getting out of this alive was by using her brain. The man glanced at her through the rearview mirror. "You okay, ma'am?" Riley smiled. "Yeah, I'm fine. How much longer?" "Not much longer," he replied coldly. The way he said it made her feel like something was about to happen at any second. Silently, Riley prayed, trying to keep her voice steady. She said, "What were you saying earlier?" "Oh, you mean the throat slasher? Interesting guy, huh?" He let out a quiet laugh. "Interesting," Riley said. "The cops will catch him soon. They already found the bodies." This time, the driver laughed openly. "Ma'am, the cops found those victims because he wanted them to." He continued, "People like that are completely insane. You can't spot them, even when they're right in front of you. They wear masks. They fool you." The more he talked about the killer, the faster Riley's heart pounded. Suddenly, the car began shaking violently. The driver hit the brakes. The car stopped with a loud jolt. He stepped out and lifted the hood, as if checking the engine. Riley stayed inside, silent. He walked to her window. "I think there's something wrong with the engine. Stay inside while I check." Riley knew the end was near. He probably stopped the car on purpose. It was time to act. The driver moved back toward the front of the vehicle. Riley heard metallic clanking from under the hood. Slowly, she opened the door, grabbed her bag, and quietly moved toward the back of the car. There were wide, empty fields on one side of the road and deep woods on the other. From the front, The driver called out, "Looks like we'll need another option, ma'am. I don't think this car's starting tonight. I live nearby. We can go there and call a mechanic." That's why he took this road, Riley thought. He wanted to drag her into the woods like the other victims. She didn't respond. She stayed behind the car, as quiet as possible. This was her only chance. She heard footsteps approaching the rear of the vehicle. With every step he took forward, Riley quietly shifted around the car in the opposite direction. By the time he reached the back, she had moved to the other side. The driver froze when he realized she wasn't there. "Ma'am? Ma'am?" Then he heard her voice behind him. "Yes? What's wrong?" Her eyes were wide open. He flinched. We can go to my place and call a mechanic." Riley gave him a thin smile. "You're not my driver, are you?" He blinked. You needed a ride, right? I needed money, so I picked you up. I just took a shortcut. Don't call the cops, ma'am." Riley stared at him. "I thought you were the killer." He laughed nervously. "No, ma'am, I'm not that psycho. Believe me," Riley said softly. "You're wrong again." He frowned. "What? It's not a man. It's a woman." The driver went pale. "What?" Riley pulled a knife from her bag. Her expression changed completely. She smiled and slashed his throat in one swift motion. He collapsed onto the dirt road. She calmly wiped her hands with a bottle of water from her bag. She always carried water, better to rinse the blood before it dries. She kicked the body into the ditch beside the dusty road. The main highway was only 5 minutes away on foot. She reached it and booked an Uber. This time, the real one. It was noon. Riley got into the car and said to the driver, "Take me home. I'm tired." The next day, the news broke. Another body had been found near an old dusty road on the outskirts of the city. Police said it appeared to be the 4th victim of the throat slasher. The victim was an Uber driver, likely heading home that night, since he had no rides logged in the system. Authorities believed the killer had stopped his vehicle and lured him into a trap, just like the other victims. The police commissioner announced they would soon arrest the man responsible and put him behind bars for life. Riley took a slow sip of her coffee, a faint smile forming as she watched the news from her living room couch. "Crazy Uber driver," the anchor said. "This is a real incident that disturbed me for a long time. I was in high school back then. One night, I went to stay over at my friend Thomas's house. Thomas and I decided to walk to the local grocery store to grab some beer. His parents were out of town, so we had the house to ourselves. We were planning to drink beer and watch a soccer game that night. The grocery store was pretty far from his house, so we called an Uber. The ride showed up in about 10 minutes, and we got in. The driver was polite and well-mannered. He looked to be in his late 30s, wearing a blue t-shirt and black pants. Thomas started chatting with him. I sat quietly in the back, while Thomas rode in the front passenger seat. Honestly, I hadn't really noticed the driver's face when we first got in. We had booked a round trip. When we arrived at the supermarket, Thomas went inside to grab the alcohol, while I waited outside. The driver stayed in the car. I lit a cigarette and for the first time glanced at him through the rearview mirror. His face looked normal, but when my eyes drifted down to his neck, I felt a chill. There were deep scratch marks across his skin, like someone had clawed him hard with long, sharp nails. He suddenly noticed me staring. He quickly pulled up the collar of his t-shirt to hide the marks. I figured maybe he had a cat or something. It wasn't my business. A few minutes later, Thomas came back and we got in the car. This time, I noticed a change in the driver. Thomas tried to keep the conversation going, but the driver cut him off with short answers. It felt like he just wanted to drop us off as quickly as possible. I was sure Thomas sensed it too. He handed me the beers. Put these behind the seat. I grabbed the plastic bags and tossed them behind the back seat. There was a narrow storage space behind my seat. We still had about 15 to 20 minutes before getting home. I started scrolling on my phone, and silence filled the car. Everything was fine until the driver suddenly braked to avoid a cat crossing the road. The car jerked, and I heard the bottles clink together. I wanted to make sure none had broken, so I reached back to check the bag. When I lifted it, something felt wrong. The bottom of the plastic bag was wet. It was dark in the car, so I couldn't see clearly at first. I reached under the bag, and what I felt made my stomach drop. The liquid was blood. I was sure it wasn't from the bottles. Without drawing attention, I turned on my phone's flashlight and aimed it toward the narrow space behind the seat. What I saw froze me. A girl was lying there, tied up and gagged in that cramped space. There was a severe wound on her head, and there had been heavy bleeding. I had accidentally placed the bag on her face, and her blood had soaked into the plastic. She wasn't moving. I knew she was dead. Now I understood the scratches on his neck. This man was a killer. He had murdered her, and before getting rid of the body, he had continued working to avoid suspicion, hiding her in that tight space. The way her body had been crammed back there deeply disturbed me. No one could fit comfortably in that space. He was a predator, a monster. I had to warn Thomas without letting the driver know I had discovered his secret. I texted Thomas everything. He saw his fingers tremble as he read the messages. He glanced at the driver, disbelief written on his face. We quickly formed a plan. There was no way we were letting this monster get away with what he'd done. The car turned onto a side street near the highway. Thomas said casually, "Hey, can you pull over for a second? I need to use the bathroom." We wanted to make sure he wasn't armed before trying to take him down. Thomas got out and disappeared behind some bushes near a tree. Minutes passed. He didn't come back. I saw the driver grow impatient. He turned to me. "Where's your friend? Call him. I've got somewhere to be after I drop you off." I called Thomas. His phone rang inside the car. We had planned that. He left it there on purpose. "Oh no," I said, pretending to worry. "He forgot his phone in here. Could you check if he's okay?" Reluctantly, the driver stepped out and walked towards the bushes. The second he passed behind the car, I jumped out and grabbed him from behind. He grunted in surprise, and Thomas rushed out of the bushes. He tackled the driver to the ground and they started struggling. Suddenly, the driver pulled a knife from his pocket and slashed at me, cutting my hand. I wasn't prepared for that. I screamed as blood ran down my fingers. Thomas kicked him hard, and the knife fell from his hand onto the pavement. Thomas then punched him in the face with all his strength. The man went unconscious. Moments later, we heard police sirens in the distance. Someone nearby must have reported the fight. That night, we didn't get to watch the game, but neither of us regretted it. The police arrived and arrested the driver. They sent the girl's body for examination. We'll always feel terrible that we couldn't save her. Later, we learned that the Uber driver had picked her up earlier that evening. She was dealing drugs. He tried to assault her. A fight broke out, and in a moment of rage, he struck her with a metal bar. He couldn't accept that he had killed her. He planned to dispose of the body after dropping us off. I still believe he would have gotten away with it if Thomas and I hadn't acted. That night, we did something right. And I want to say this: if you ever see someone being harassed or in danger, act wisely and safely. Sometimes, stepping in can prevent something terrible. The driver is now behind bars, and ever since that night, whenever I go out after dark, I stay alert, because evil doesn't always look like a monster. Sometimes it hides behind an innocent face.